Some people will tell you that guilt is your conscience doing its job. That feeling bad means you care. That sensitive, responsible people just feel more. And that is actually a good thing. And here is the uncomfortable truth. They are not entirely wrong. Guilt does serve a real psychological function. It is a signal. It tells you when your actions have crossed a value you hold. Researchers at the University of Toronto found in 2014 that people who experience guilt after wrongdoing are more likely to repair relationships and avoid repeating harmful behavior. So yes, guilt in the right context makes you a better human. But here's where that argument completely falls apart. What happens when the guilt never stops? What happens when you feel it for saying no, for resting, for someone else's bad mood, for existing in a way that inconvenienced someone? That is not your conscience working. That is a program running in the background of your mind that was installed before you were old enough to question it. And today you are going to find out exactly what that program is and where it came from. There are two completely different types of guilt living inside you right now, and most people never learn to tell them apart. The first type is called healthy guilt. Psychologists call it reparative guilt. It shows up after a specific action, it motivates a specific repair, and then it dissolves. You snapped at a friend, you apologize, the guilt lifts. Clean cycle, done. The second type has a different name in clinical psychology, toxic guilt or chronic guilt. And this one does not dissolve. It does not point to a specific action. It just sits in your chest like a stone, and it expands to fill whatever space you give it. You feel it when you relax. You feel it when someone is upset near you. You feel it when you ask for something. You feel it when you simply take up space. The reason this comparison matters is not academic. If you mistake chronic guilt for healthy guilt, you will spend your entire life trying to fix something that was never broken. You will apologize your way through decades, shrink yourself to manage other people's emotions, and call it being a good person. Understanding the difference is not just interesting psychology, it is the first step to getting your life back. Most people who carry chronic guilt do the same thing. They accept it. They build their entire personality around managing it. Here is what that looks like in real life. You over-apologize, not once or twice, but compulsively. A 2016 study published in Frontiers in Psychology found that people with high guilt sensitivity apologize even when they are not responsible for the negative outcome, simply because someone near them is experiencing discomfort. You become what psychologists call an emotional caretaker. You read the room the second you walk into it. You adjust your tone, your body language, your requests, your entire presence, based on what mood other people seem to be in. You put yourself last and call it kindness. You say yes when every cell in your body wants to say no, and when you finally do say no, maybe once, maybe after years, you spend 3 days replaying it, convinced you are a terrible person. You avoid conflict not because you are peaceful, but because conflict feels like proof that you failed someone. And underneath all of it is a quiet, constant voice that whispers, "You are too much. You are not enough. It is your fault. You should have done more." This is the common path. Billions of people are on it right now. Here is the psychological trap that makes this so hard to escape. The strategies people use to manage chronic guilt actually reinforce it. Every time you apologize for something that was not your fault, your brain logs that as evidence that you were indeed responsible. Every time you shrink yourself to regulate someone else's mood, your nervous system learns that other people's emotions are your emergency. Neuroscientist and author Dr. Bessel van der Kolk documented this extensively in his 2014 book, The Body Keeps the Score. The brain does not distinguish between what you did to survive and what is actually true. If you learned as a child that keeping the peace meant keeping yourself safe, your brain rewired itself around that strategy. And now that strategy runs automatically. The person doing all of this is not weak. They are not broken. They are incredibly adaptive. They were brilliant enough as a child to figure out how to survive an environment that required them to be responsible for adult emotions. The problem is, the strategy never updated. You are 27 or 34 or 41, and you are still running a coping mechanism designed for a 7-year-old. And the longer you run it, the more you cement the belief that you are the problem. That is not healing, that is a loop. Now here is what the research actually points toward. And this is where it gets genuinely interesting, because it is the opposite of what most people expect. The solution to chronic guilt is not toughening up. It is not learning to care less. It is not becoming more selfish or building higher walls. Psychologist Dr. Kristen Neff at the University of Texas at Austin has been studying self-compassion since 2003, and her findings are consistent. The people who recover from chronic guilt and people-pleasing patterns are not the ones who stopped caring. They are the ones who learn to extend the same care they give everyone else, back to themselves. This is option B. It starts with a single reframe. Guilt is information, not identity. When you feel guilt, instead of immediately accepting it as truth, you ask, did I actually do something that violated my own values? If yes, you repair and move on. If no, you treat that guilt the same way you would treat a fire alarm going off in an empty building. You note it. You do not evacuate the building of your selfhood every single time it triggers. The second component is understanding where the guilt came from. Because once you can see the origin, once you can trace it back to the 7-year-old who learned that love was conditional on being perfectly manageable, it stops feeling like who you are and starts feeling like something that happened to you. That distinction changes everything. Let us put these two paths side by side so you can see exactly what you are choosing between. Option A, chronic guilt left unexamined, gives you short-term social safety. People around you tend to stay calm because you are constantly regulating their emotions for them. You avoid conflict. You get to keep the identity of being the good one, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together. That has real value. That is why people stay in it. But the long-term cost is severe. Anxiety, resentment that has nowhere to go, relationships built on a version of you that is not real, and a bone-deep exhaustion that no amount of sleep fixes. Studies from the American Psychological Association published in 2019 consistently link chronic guilt and excessive self-blame with higher rates of depression and generalized anxiety disorder. Option B, recognizing and rerouting the guilt pattern, costs something different. It costs discomfort up front. Boundaries feel terrifying at first. Saying no feels like a moral failure before it feels like self-respect. Some relationships shift when you stop being endlessly available. That is real, and it is hard. But what you get on the other side is something the people-pleasing path can never give you: actual relationships with your actual self inside them, and a nervous system that is not constantly on fire. The verdict is this: guilt is not your problem. Unexamined guilt is. There is a version of you, the version that existed before you learned that your worth was conditional, who did not feel responsible for everyone around them. That version of you is not gone. It got buried under years of adaptive behavior that was absolutely necessary at the time. The people who told you that guilt means you care were right about one thing. You do care, deeply. That is not the issue. The issue is that somewhere along the way you were taught to turn that care into a surveillance system pointed entirely at yourself. Every room you walk into, you scan for who might. Here is what you can actually do starting today. Step 1. Create a guilt audit. For the next 7 days, every time you feel guilt, write down exactly what triggered it. Then ask one question. Did I actually violate a value I hold, or did I just fail to make someone else comfortable? That single question will start to separate real guilt from programmed guilt with surgical precision. Step 2. Practice the pause. Before you apologize, before you explain yourself, before you shrink, pause for 4 seconds. Not to suppress the impulse, but to give your prefrontal cortex enough time to catch up to your nervous system. Research from Stanford's psychology department found that a 4-second delay before reactive responses significantly reduces automatic compliance behavior. Step 3. Trace it back. When the guilt is intense and clearly disproportionate to the situation, ask, how old does this feeling feel? Not how old are you? How old does this feel? Often you will land on a specific memory, a specific age, a specific dynamic. That is your nervous system showing you the origin. You do not have to fix it in that moment. Just seeing it is enough to begin loosening it. And if you are recognizing patterns in yourself that feel deep, that feel like they have roots going back to childhood, you do not have to navigate that alone. Around the 7-minute mark of this kind of work is exactly when a lot of people realize they want real support. A resource I genuinely recommend is BetterHelp. It connects you with licensed therapists online, on your schedule, without a waiting room. If therapy feels like too much right now, there are also self-compassion workbooks. Dr. Kristen Neff has one specifically designed for this work that you can start tonight. Links to both are in the description below. If this video made something click for you, if you recognized yourself somewhere in here, share it with one person who needs to see it. They probably will not tell you they need it. That is kind of the whole point. Drop in the comments. What did you feel guilty for this week that was not actually your fault? I read every single one. And if you want to go deeper into the psychology of why your brain does what it does, the next video is right there. It is going to challenge something else you think you know about yourself. See you in 10 seconds. Disclaimer. This video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing constitutes professional advice of any kind.